Hello, my name is Ali North, and today I'm going to be talking to you about becoming a wildlife conservationist, or at least how I've become a wildlife conservationist. It's an incredibly diverse field, and very much not a linear career path. So everyone's experiences are quite different, but I hope this is at least a little bit useful for anyone interested in learning a bit more about some aspects of working within this sector. So hopefully I can give you a bit of an idea of some of the day-to-day activities that can be involved, and some of the things I've been thinking about that I've found useful, and will hopefully provide you a bit some sort of tips and ideas of things that you could do if you're interested in pursuing a similar career. So I'm currently a PhD researcher with the Institute of Zoology within ZSL and University of Plymouth, working with Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust. And this is funded by Aries Doctoral Training Partnership. I'll talk a bit more about what I'm doing as part of my PhD later. But I've also worked in a few different roles within wildlife conservation, so across conservation science, in research assistant roles, within science communication, and within nature advocacy as well. So I'll hopefully give you a bit of an insight into those as well. And just to say that I really love being a wildlife conservationist, but it definitely does have challenges as well. So I'll highlight some of those towards the end as well. So there are many routes into wildlife conservation, but the one that I took was largely science focused. So I started out with a zoology undergraduate degree, and this gave me a sort of broad understanding of animal evolution, animal behaviour, ecology, and some of the threats facing the natural world as well. And from this, I decided I wanted to focus a bit more and focus my efforts on wildlife conservation. So I conducted my master's degree then in biodiversity and conservation. And these degrees together then helped me have a sort of broad knowledge base across these sort of topics, but also helped me to start developing more practical skills for the lab and for the field and for conducting independent research as well. So just a few examples then. So I was lucky enough to go on some really amazing field trips and see some places of the world and ecosystems that I hadn't been exposed to before, and meet some amazing people and communities as well. So this is from South Africa here, with the amazing sight of a lion eating with all sorts of vultures as well. And this was in Kenya as well. So just a couple of examples there. But in terms of research then, my first undergraduate research project then was my third year dissertation, and I was looking at trying to understand the potential impacts of artificial street lighting on small mammal populations. So this is a wood mouse here in a bag that I'd just taken out of a small mammal trap, which is basically a way of monitoring mammal populations. You can identify what you've got and then release them back into the hedge. And so this involved lots of field work, but also starting to understand how to analyze data, how to problem solve when things don't go to plan, and how to write that up in a final sort of dissertation paper style report. And this was really useful then moving on to my master's degree, and the research then was a lot longer. It was 6 months. I was working with Dr. Amber Griffiths, and I was looking at a disease called ranovirosis, which has been implicated in the decline of common frog populations in the UK. So I was zipping around ponds in Cornwall, swabbing amphibians, such as this lovely frog here, and taking these to a molecular lab to work out from these swabs whether there was disease present in the ponds. And I also worked with ZSL and the Garden Wildlife Health Project, and they very kindly conducted some post-mortems for us as well, because we were finding some deceased animals, unfortunately. So that was useful in working out whether these mortalities were a result of disease or not. And then I was working with a data set from frog life which was all about trying to see if there were certain garden characteristics associated with increased severity of this disease in common frogs, and ultimately working out if there were certain things that pond owners could do to try and limit the impacts of disease. So that's a kind of really brief overview of the kinds of things I was doing through my degrees. But I did want to really briefly mention my A-levels. You'll see they're quite varied across sort of science and the arts. And just to highlight really that you don't necessarily have to do all sciences to go on to do science. I still use sort of a lot of the things I learned in my art and design course, for example, to sort of help share messages in a more artistic way. So there are all sorts of routes into wildlife conservation. So once I had my degrees, gaining experience was really useful and important really to ultimately start getting paid. And so I did a lot of this through volunteering. And I did this predominantly all in the UK, local to where I was living at the time. I did a lot of it whilst I was still at university. But there was still a sort of the problem of trying to trade off gaining this experience, which is unpaid, versus earning money to live as well. So there is always that issue, but I would definitely recommend looking out for paid opportunities as well. There's funded traineeships and internships are possible too, and I'll mention one specific one that I've definitely benefited from later as well. But just some of the volunteer work then that I was getting involved in. I was involved a lot in the student-led ecological society at the university down in Exeter, actually based down in Falmouth. And one of these projects was all about moth monitoring and trying to engage new audiences in moths to increase their awareness of how amazingly diverse this animal group is, and how beautiful and colourful they are, and how important they are within ecosystems. I got involved with research projects being conducted by academics and PhD students whilst I was doing my undergraduate degree as well when I could. So I did a lot of bird box monitoring and bird ringing, which was a lot of fun. And getting involved in local conservation projects, local specialist groups as well, like amphibian groups or local mammal groups. This picture here is measuring a common toad. So this was from a toad patrol local to where I was living at the time. And I applied for projects and things to do in the summers between my studying as well, and I was lucky enough to join this particular project, which is run by the University of Exeter, all about marine turtles. And this was basically involved lots of patrolling beaches at night time to monitor nesting behaviour and hatching success of green and loggerhead turtles. That was a really awesome experience. And so the skills that I gained through my degrees and these volunteering projects helped me to ultimately start getting paid for what I was doing. And the projects that I've been involved in so far have been really quite varied. So I thought I'd just pick 3 different ones that are quite different in terms of what I was doing to hopefully highlight how varied that it can be. So this one on the left then is a beautiful harvest mouse. And this was the first time that I was getting funded to do science. So this was as part of an internship for the People's Trust for Endangered Species. And I was studying the potential impacts of farmland management on harvest mouse nesting. So as beautiful as this mouse was, I didn't actually see the mice. I was focused on the nests. So this is a breeding nest. They're sort of tennis ball shaped woven structures hidden within dense grass and hedgerows. And but this was a really good insight into and more experience for conducting research in terms of developing methods problem solving, working with landowners, and again analysing all that data and working out if there were certain things that landowners could do to help harvest mice. So then another example of quite a different job, again, was with BirdLife International. So I joined their science team and worked on helping produce this report, the Messengers report, which was aimed at policymakers going to COP21, the climate change conference that was held in Paris in 2015. And this was all about, or at least my role was gathering data and reviewing the literature about the documented and projected impacts of climate change on birds, and then working very collaboratively within the science team, but also with the policy team and with the comms team and designers to make sure that the report was accessible to a wide audience and sort of attractive and easy to read, yeah, basically accessible to lots of different people that would read it, and getting the message across as clearly as we could. And then I moved on to, again, quite a different role, this time with Suffolk Wildlife Trust as a hedgehog officer. And this was a community-based role, so working with all sorts of different people, different audiences. And it was really the sort of biggest project that I'd managed to date, because it involved developing sort of all the activities to work towards certain aims. It involved managing budgets, recruiting and managing volunteers, and working out how to evaluate the conservation impact of the project as well. So it was very people focused, but it did also involve seeing quite a lot of hedgehogs as well. So we also worked with Nottingham-Trent University, helping establish a new field site as part of their research, which involved lots of walking streets at night time, tracking hedgehogs, and recruiting garden owners to install wildlife cameras into their gardens as well. So really quite a broad role that one was, but I hope this demonstrates how non-linear a pathway can be within wildlife conservation. So you can see I've worked on quite different species, different conservation threats through these different roles, but each has provided experience and skills that's been really useful for the next project that I've been working on. And along a similar vein, then, the kinds of skills and the kinds of day-to-day activities is incredibly broad. So these are just some examples here, and I would just say there really is something for everyone. And these are just some of the skills that I've had a go at developing, continue to develop, some that I definitely enjoy more than others, some that I definitely need to work on a lot more. But I hope this, demonstrates that you can really gain skills and apply them to all sorts of different situations and species and conservation issues. So just as a couple of examples then, so as a PhD student, I'm very much down in this bottom right-hand corner, in terms of I'm spending a lot of my time doing data handling and statistics, survey design and data collection. But in quite broad contrast, in the past, I have helped organise large community events, which has been all about, well, this specific example is a hedgehog lantern parade, which was all about raising awareness about hedgehogs, celebrating hedgehogs as they're a declining species in the UK. So really, really quite different activities. And again, so as a PhD student, I'm writing literature reviews and writing up my results and findings to share within a scientific community. But also, in contrast, in the past, I've helped write handbooks for land managers, or even family activity booklets for young people to encourage them to think about wildlife in their garden. So really quite different activities, different audiences, but all within wildlife conservation. So just a couple more examples in terms of things that you could end up doing running courses and workshops, again, to promote conservation messages or wildlife or conservation activities to different audiences, public speaking at conferences or community events, media interviews, so you could be sharing your research findings with the media or talking about conservation issues or problems as well. So my current role then is as a PhD student, and I'm studying, or at least trying to understand, the drivers and the ecological impacts of a non-native newt species here in the UK, the alpine newt. So this guy here is a male alpine newt. Then we've got these female alpine newts, and I'm looking at whether, or at least part of what I'm looking at, is whether there are any ecological impacts of these guys on our native newts, such as the tiny little palmate newts. My current role as a PhD student is quite varied still as well, and definitely all of my previous roles have helped me to sort of get to where I am now and doing what I'm doing, in terms of developing research questions, designing methods, conducting field and lab work. So these boxes here are all full of newts that I had caught earlier in the year on my field season. These were all ready to be measured and marked and swabbed and released back into the pond. And then lab work then to analyze some of these samples. A lot of what I do is computer-based as well, so a lot of analyzing data, sourcing data from other places, writing literature reviews and things like that as well. And then outside of my sort of strict research work, I also have other academic roles. So, for example, as a student representative for IOZ PhD students. So that involves writing newsletters, for example, to try and share opportunities and things that other students are up to. And I try to practice science communication as well. So I'm a co-editor of an environmental science blog called SciEnvy, which is all about sharing the research of PhD students from the ARES doctoral training partnership to others as well. And this is a random photo, but this is of some plasticine newts, and this is something that I've really enjoyed doing, is using art to share conservation messages as well. So this was a stop motion that I had a go at making earlier this year, so I still try to use art in conservation when I can as well. So that's what I'm sort of doing at the minute. An overview, I guess, of what I see as being the benefits and the challenges of a career in wildlife conservation then are the fact that you do get to work on some really exciting projects in some really amazing places and with some very cool people. You might get to be involved in field work. That's my absolute favorite thing. You can see me here getting very excited with a smooth newt earlier in the year. I love being outside and being able to observe the species that I'm studying and working with. You get to discover things new to science. So if you're working within research, you're finding things out, understanding systems, and hopefully contributing at least a tiny bit to conservation of them as well. But then just a few challenges to highlight also. At least I found that I have moved around quite a lot for funded positions. So, and there are challenges associated with that in terms of sort of rebuilding up your networks. It is a competitive field. I mean, that's no different to many other fields, but there will be jobs and PhD projects that you apply for that you don't get. So there certainly are rejections involved. And the fact that it is a non-linear pathway, so that does mean it can be hard to see where you might be going next. And it is often associated with short-term contracts as well, so funding for specific projects, and that funding ends, so you look for another one. So there are certainly challenges associated with that. But having said that, it is an amazing career path and one that I can't imagine doing anything else. Any advice then for anyone interested in pursuing a similar career? I would say seek out local volunteering or internship or funding opportunities where you can. So just a few examples here then. So obviously ZSL, and I've got a link to their website or specific website that you might find useful at the end as well. Check out your local wildlife trust, the People's Trust for Endangered Species internship. So that was the harvest mouse internship that I definitely benefited from. And it's worth looking at the British Ecological Society as well. But you can always create your own opportunities as well. So whether that's writing a blog or using social media to practice your science communication, use your voice and talk about the issues that matter to you, contact your MPs about environmental issues, write petitions, and join university societies and campaigns as well. So I definitely gained a lot of confidence and experience through working with the student-led Ecological Society whilst I was at university. And there's all sorts of campaigns that you can get involved in as well. So there's one at the minute called the Hedgehog Friendly Campus campaign. So it's definitely worth checking out what is around that you can get involved in. So thank you so much for listening if you've got this far. I hope I've demonstrated that the field of wildlife conservation is broad and it is varied, and I hope I've given you a sort of a bit of an idea of the kinds of activities that you could be involved in if you were to pursue this area of work. There really is something for everyone, and we really do need people from all backgrounds with all manner of expertise to really help address the issues facing wildlife today. So get involved in projects local to you and check out the ZSL website for more tips and information as well. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and that's it from me. Bye-bye.